in the age of the Apple II computer, or the Commodore 64, or ZX Spectrum.
All right.
Like, it was a forbidden game that you loaded off of a worn out floppy disk that you had to ask around for. So in order to set the stage for Faith's visual design, I need to take y'all back to the first time I ever got scared playing a video game. I was really young. I was at my friend's house and we were playing Doom. I don't know if y'all have heard of it. It was my first time playing Doom, and I was having a lot of fun, actually, carrying my shotgun around, blowing away zombified soldiers, when suddenly this fireball zooms past me. And I turn around, and far away, down this long stretch of hallway, I saw this.
Oh, yeah.
I was horrified. And I didn't fully understand what was happening to me. I had to stop playing. Like, I told him to take the controllers. I didn't.
I shall not be afraid of the terror in the night.
So if you couldn't tell, I'm trying to do a similar thing here. Oh, don't mind the freaking mess in the whatever, in my room. My room's a lot cleaner now. It's all good. Yeah, so I'm trying to do stuff like this. Trying to figure out, like, how many frames per second I need to do. Yeah, because when I'm looking at what I got now, it's looking like 1,000 different frames. It's too many frames, dude. So I don't know if I want to trace all that. Let's see. We could go for 5. See what happens. How many comes out of 5? Does it say? Okay. Okay. Yeah. And then look at all these frames I gotta do. Oh wait, what? What's this? Oh, that's tight actually. What the hell? Yo, that's tight. Okay. And then my aim here is to make this more simple. Am I really gonna draw fucking 574 frames? Hey, I got nothing better to do right now, so, or in general, so. Let's see. You want to load the following files as an animation? Sure. Okay. Still going a little too fast. How do I make it go slower? Honestly, this is kind of cool. It's kind of cool. What? It's actually... Oh, that's crazy. So, wait, what? Is that really 500 files? Okay, well. I guess we gotta get to it then. Yeah, I've been hella inspired by Erdorf, Lisa, and Undertale. Those three are my inspirations at the moment. Okay.
Undertale.
Cool. Now we're just chilling. Try to freaking draw this with the tablet. I gotta find the frame with...
So,
green
Faith is
here?
the story of an exorcism gone wrong during the late 1980s. You play as a young priest who returns to the house where it all began a year later to finish what they started. So, I released Faith in October 2017 on itch and GameJolt. In December of that year, Faith appeared on IGN's listicle of the best horror games of 2017. So I don't mention this to brag, but rather to illustrate what my talk is going to be about today. Here's a character from one of the other games that made it onto the list, and here's a character from my game. Sorry, I'll only keep it on screen for a while for you. There you go, it's gone. Today I want to tell the story of how a retro-inspired, chunkily pixelated nightmare came to coexist in the same space as AAA horror titles that feature next-gen graphics. First, I'm going to cover the inspirations and research behind Faith's visual design. Then I will review key design principles and processes that guided my work. And finally, I will share the results of Faith's visual design and what I've taken away from my experiences. So Faith began with a single question that kind of drove my design process, and that was, could I make an effective horror game using just the most basic graphics that I could think of? Could a game that looked like the Oregon Trail feel like PT? Holy grail of horror games, in my opinion. I gave myself this challenge right after the cancellation of the ill-fated Silent Hills project, Lord bless and keep it, that was helmed by Hideo Kojima and in collaboration with Guillermo del Toro. And yes, I'm still bitter about that. Everyone should be bitter about that. Raise your hand if you're bitter about Silent Hills being canceled. Okay. So I was, and I still am, mildly obsessed with PT. It is my absolute favorite horror game. And I wanted to join the ranks of indie devs who were creating what I call PT-ware, or spiritual successors for PT, so Visage, or Visage, and Allison Road. But I didn't have the funds, or the time, or the know-how to work with high-fidelity graphics like in the Fox engine or in Unreal. So I decided to make a horror game that looked like it could have existed in the age of the Apple II computer or the Commodore 64 or ZX Spectrum. Like it was a forbidden game that you loaded off of a worn out floppy disk that you had to ask around for. So in order to set the stage for Faith's visual design, I need to take y'all back to the first time I ever got scared playing a video game. I was really young. I was at my friend's house and we were playing Doom. I don't know if y'all have heard of it. It was my first time playing Doom.
Oh, okay.
And I was having a lot of fun, actually, carrying my shotgun around, blowing away zombified soldiers, when suddenly this fireball zooms past me. And I turn around, and far away, down this long stretch of hallway, I saw this. I was horrified. And I didn't fully understand what was happening. I had to stop playing. Like I told him to take the controllers. I didn't fully understand what was happening to me until years later. I heard this quote from the movie The Blair Witch Project. Oh my gosh, what the F is that?
Shit, I do not know how to use this tablet.
How many of y'all know what scene I'm talking about? A few of y'all? Okay. Do y'all know what, y'all know that they don't actually show what the character's reacting to, but what they were actually reacting to was a member of the cast draped in a white sheet and wearing a Halloween mask. So I'm really glad they didn't show that.
Nah.
But we were more scared by
Honestly,
what we
damn.
couldn't
I've been
see
using the
than
mouse
what
for
was
so
actually
long,
on
I don't-
screen.
I'm not too
And this
interested
quote
in
became the
doing
golden
tablet right
standard,
now.
and it's my favorite quote from any horror movie. It became the golden standard by which Faith's visual elements were compared, and the most important reaction I wanted to get from players, I wanted them to scream this line. Because fear of the unknown, it creates feelings of dread, and dread is the golden nugget of horror game design. And it just so happens that pixel art, especially from the second generation of game consoles and game computers, has a high level of abstraction, and that abstraction makes for a great medium for creating fear of the unknown. So let's talk about Faith's inspirations. The story of Faith's visual design is a story of constraints. I chose visual design constraints that were inspired by second-gen hardware. I wasn't making a homebrew game, so I was only approximating retro hardware limitations. I was trying to nail a feeling rather than achieve technical accuracy. So I chose a canvas resolution of 192 by 160 pixels because I read somewhere on Reddit that was the approximate resolution.
Fixed 15 FPS too? Damn, dude. 15 FPS? Are you kidding me? Yeah, it does look really smooth. Damn. Hold on, I gotta go back. I gotta go back.
Of the Atari 2600, and this is probably not true, but I just ran with it. And to me, it was more important to pick something and stick with it than to be completely technically accurate with the retro aesthetic that I was trying to achieve. So I throttled the game's FPS to 15. That helped me in the animation process, and it made for an overall clunkier experience. I worked with a limited palette, probably no more than 6 or 8 colors on screen at a time, and I used a limited number of objects on screen. And that was completely arbitrary. It was more getting the feeling down than an actual hard number. So to give y'all an idea, this is a visual representation of the pixel real estate I gave myself for Faith versus a game running at 4K. Can y'all see that? There should be on this side, yeah, that little orange square. Oh, yeah, that's what I had to work with versus 4K. I just want y'all to appreciate how much pixel artists can achieve with so little. 192 pixels by 160 is a 6:5 aspect ratio, which afforded me more vertical space than 4:3 or 16:9. And that's something that I kind of gripe about with modern game monitors. It's so horizontal and stretched out. And I get like field of view and all that, but I kind of miss verticality in our sprite design and environment design. So I really enjoy designing environments with a little more verticality in the scenes. So fine art-wise, Faith has a few big inspirations. So my background is in animation, so I've studied a little bit of fine art. This was a big inspiration, Christina's World by Andrew Wyeth. I really like how the visual elements in this painting are minimally arranged. And not that it's a minimalist painting, but the elements are arranged in kind of a sparse fashion. There's lots of visual tension here, and to me, there's a sense of foreboding, and it really gives me feelings of isolation. Francisco de Goya happens to be my favorite painter, and I really like his black painting series. They're very macabre, and these scenes are pulled out of darkness to me. The predominant color is this black, mysterious field, and that's why Faith has a permanent black background for the same reason. And of course, no good piece of horror wouldn't take inspiration from the art of manga artist Junji Ito. Hope I didn't butcher that name. I probably did. Let's move on. So, from a research standpoint, Faith takes place during the satanic scare of the 1980s. Who did time in the 80s? I did 2 years in the 80s. Okay. The rest of y'all, listen up. So the satanic scare of the 1980s was a period of widespread paranoia about Satanism, devil worship, and occult practices like the band Kiss and Dungeons and Dragons.
So many.
I wonder how Harry Potter would have done in the 1980s. I wanted to recreate the world of the unassuming bourgeois middle class that was in the height of the decade of excess. In order to do that, I had to reject some visual stereotypes that we game developers have created about the 1980s. First, no blue and pink neon cyberpunk cityscapes. Like, that wasn't the 80s. Like, that wasn't an actual thing. Instead, I researched, So I researched floor plans and architectural drawings of big suburban homes with interconnecting rooms.
Shit.
No DeLoreans. Who declared the DeLorean the
What if I was
car ambassador of the
ambitious,
1980s? Like, how did that happen? Get out of here. Just give me a four-door sedan. And I said no to the 80s punk aesthetic just for this game. I wanted boring working class adults who still dress like it was the 1970s and then forced their kids to dress the same way. Okay. It's not the idealistic, nostalgic vision of the 1980s that we've created, but I think it's something a little more authentic. Because there's a dark side of the 1980s. There's these things called payphones, and if you didn't have money, then you couldn't call home, and like there's no GPS or way to kind of put yourself on Google Maps if you got lost or something. So looking at my process, the process of representing objects and characters from this era as pixel art,
so many fucking frames.
It was more of an additive than a reductive process. So rather than take my reference images or an image and reduce it to my canvas resolution, I would just start from nothing, and I would pull that object out of the black background until it was just enough detail to be recognizable, rather than taking away detail. But with images so minimalist, it was a challenge to not, what I call, overproduce certain objects and environments. Oftentimes I would go back and actually take pixels out and take details out of a sprite or a scene that I had created. And I really had to just trust the charming nostalgic appeal of these old chunky pixels and simply walk away from working on a sprite once it was there, once the representation was there.
198.
And then for the demon design, these are just a couple. Besides keeping it ambiguous and creating that fear of the unknown, just pulling off of really common things like spiders and blood. We're naturally disturbed by those things. So adhering to Gestalt principles helps tighten the composition of even the most minimalistic scenes. Here in these images, I'm using the principle of negative space to imply paths in the woods that are meant to mislead the player. Without giving anything away, you can actually get lost by following these paths, so you can't trust them. Some more examples of negative space. On the left, I created a cramped space that is also isolated from the outside, thanks to this large field of black, this large amount of negative space around the environment.
Dude, it's like
the player wonders what is lurking around outside of that little window.
Yeah, do like
and the use of negative space on the right, it creates anticipation and unease with the placement of those sewing mannequins. The player knows that something is going to happen with them because of how they are positioned relative to the player. Negative space is a great little technique to harness that feeling of unease and anticipation. So arguably the most distinguishing visual elements of Faith and the most popular are these rotoscoped animations that play throughout the game. My inspiration was this critic's accolade that I saw in the trailer for The Witch in 2015. It feels like we're watching something we should not be seeing. There he goes.
Okay.
And that became my rationale for subjecting the player to these animated sequences. I wanted to shatter the expectations of players who were probably expecting something like the mini games from Five Nights at Freddy's. So they were getting used to the chunky pixels and getting used to how things moved and how things worked. There's something very unsettling about suddenly switching visual styles on the viewer, much like these uncomfortably detailed
573
close-up drawings from SpongeBob and other cartoons. When I saw that, I knew that I loved SpongeBob. That was the moment. It catches the viewer or the player off guard. So these rotoscoped animations also had the effect of reaching out to the player. Again, I wanted this to feel like a cursed game that was sentient and knew about the player, knew their fears, like the game itself wanted to scare them. And at the very least, we humans are disturbed by images that fall into the uncanny valley. We naturally get uncomfortable watching things that move like us. And the animated monstrosities in Faith have this uncanny quality because they're based on real human performances.
All right, we're gonna speed run this shit. 2 pixels.
It me. So there I am shooting reference for the stabby scene. That's enough of that.
So cool.
So having a little bit of stage acting experience from high school and knowing that no good animator starts an animation without shooting reference first, I performed all the rotoscope scenes myself. So here you can see me editing. After I edited the original footage, I edited it to take out frames and mess with the timing to make it a little more unsettling. So my process was pretty straightforward. First, I would wait till my wife was at work, and then I would scale it. Then I would get in costume. Then I would film what I wanted to do, and it's kind of therapeutic. So after I was done filming the footage, I would scale the original footage to my working resolution and import the frames into Photoshop and convert it to 15 frames per second. Then I would hand trace the outline of the character for the cutscene and fill in things like the face or any colored fields that I wanted to have, or any solid fields of color, and on another video layer. And then finally, I would add things like facial features and other elements specifically to the character on another video layer. And most of that was a little bit of keyframe animation, then filling in the in-betweens, but most of it was just straight ahead animation where I was just trying to make something grow out of a face or have blood drip down from a mouth. It was mostly just straight ahead stuff. So using Photoshop's video layers, it was a very non-destructive workflow, which I really appreciated as an animator. I wouldn't have gotten these done without it.
Wait,
On average, each rotoscope scene would involve 75 to 120 drawings.
Wait, so what's his fix?
So the result was a disturbingly, most of that was, then I would film what I wanted to do, and it's kind of therapeutic. So after I was done filming the footage, I would scale the original footage to my working resolution and import the frames into Photoshop and convert it to 15 frames per second.
I'm gonna do his thing.
Then I would hand trace the outline of the character for the cutscene and fill in things like the face or any colored fields that I wanted to have, or any solid fields of color, and on another video layer. And then finally, I would add things like facial features and other elements specifically to the character on another video layer. And most of that was a little bit of keyframe animation, then filling in the in-betweens, but most of it was just straight ahead animation where I was just trying to make something grow out of a face or have blood drip down from a mouth. It was mostly just straight ahead stuff. So using Photoshop's video layers, it was a very non-destructive workflow, which I really appreciated as an animator. I wouldn't have gotten these done without it. On average, each rotoscope scene would involve 75 to 120 drawings.
Oh, so he's probably going to explain it, or no? Yeah, how did he
So
get
the
there?
result was a disturbingly lifelike animation that brought the chunky pixels to life. This is all me. There's me in my Texas apron. It actually required 2 shots. There's me in a mirror. So animating at 15 frames per second was a smart move, really smart, considering the amount of drawings I had to do. Our eyes have kind of our own kind of natural frame interpolation when we look at moving images or changing images. This is something that Richard Williams, a famous animator, called the persistence of
This is
vision.
interesting.
So we produce an ocular after image when we look at a changing image, and basically one frame bleeds into the next frame and effectively fills in the gaps for us. A lot of players remark on a famous animator called the persistence of vision. So we produce an ocular after image when we look at a changing image, and basically one frame bleeds into the next frame and effectively fills in the gaps for us. A lot of players remark on the smoothness of the animations when in reality they're running at a very low frame rate.
Wait, where's the layer?
So talking about the results, These are chat messages from a streamer, from a Twitch stream, someone who played Faith. So there are many ways to define success in indie game development. For us horror game designers, we actually have the added pressure of scaring the player on top of entertaining them. So based on player reaction, I think Faith's unsettling visual design contributed to its effectiveness as a horror game. So here's what I want y'all to take away from this talk. Basic graphics can be scary. Of course, a good horror game combines not only the visual elements, but the audio, and it needs good scare design, needs good scenario and level design, just like any game. But if you don't have the means to work with cutting edge graphics, or the time, or the patience, your visual design can still contribute to a feeling of horror. I just stuck to one aesthetic, and working within my constraints, I had a lot of fun with it, and I think it turned out pretty compelling. I should probably change the first point to basic graphics can still support your game's vision, because the research and design techniques and the processes that I've spoken about can apply to non-horror games as well. So the tech for video game graphics has gone so far into the future, and I hope some consideration, if possible, can still be made for those of us who are stuck in the retro era. Second, constraints can set you free from creative block, free from stylistic inconsistency, and free from the expertise or time or funds needed to develop cutting-edge graphics. And I, for one, I'm an evangelist for these retro-inspired horror games, but I still enjoy modern graphics in games myself, and there's definitely value in them. But if you want to make horror games, but are daunted by the skills gap of creating good graphics, then join us. There's a lot of us. We're growing. We have scan lines, we have dithering, we have affine polygon transforms. Retro-inspired horror is a thing, and lots of indie horror devs are combining their design skills with the nostalgia aesthetic with terrifying results. Y'all should probably know this by now. This is FNAF. Nun Massacre by Puppet Combo is he's kind of the king of PlayStation era throwback games. Paratopic, which just won an award last night, and this one's called World of Horror. I really like this aesthetic. So you can find me on Twitter, there's my email, and if you want to support my work, you can find my games on itch and GameJolt. I released Faith Chapter 2 in February, and I released my most recent game called The Wind yesterday morning. And it was actually, I was on a deadline. I was actually commissioned by IFC Films, who released The Babadook, Human Centipede, Autopsy of Jane Doe. They asked me for an Oregon Trail style horror game. So there is a demand for retro grade horror. And I hope this talk was encouraging. I hope this talk kind of illuminated the visual considerations that went into a retro horror game that could stand its own against AAA horror titles in some aspects. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so turn on a grid. Okay. It's really gonna make me do this. Keep animation okay, Windows, timeline. Window, timeline. Oh yeah. So, how many frames do I have now? Oh. Oh my gosh, sorry guys. Nothing's really going on here right now. I'm just figuring out how to do it, I guess. Just trying to figure out how the friggin' what the heck is it? How do I do that? How Faith pixel art. Oh, they have tutorials? Hey, I gotta take a piss. Hey. It's pissing time. cool. Okay. Let's learn a thing or two.
What month is it again? My would have fumbled completely. Let's take a look. Most parts. Instead choosing to adhere to strict limitations that allow shapes and objects to be portrayed in stylized few of you have heard of. This game heavily utilizes a technique called rotoscoping for the majority of its complex animation, which is an animation practice almost as old as the medium of digital art itself. Rotoscoping is the practice of taking a piece of live action footage, such as a person dancing or walking, and tracing over it frame by frame to capture the exact real-life movements of a person in an animated way, creating this smooth and lifelike movement we see in Faith. This practice can be used to varying levels, with some people choosing to take certain keyframes of a live action movement to then animate the parts in between, whereas others took every last frame of a real-life movement and placed it onto an animated character, a process that I imagine is hell on earth. And that isn't even considering the fact that we have a ton of technology to speed up the process nowadays, such as onion skinning programs that allow animators to see previous frames, to get use this the turn of entries of Mortal Kombat. Yes, I know I know. Now, it's obvious that the actual gameplay has a pretty minimalistic art style, as this game takes a lot of notes from the Atari era of gaming back in the early 80s, before that whole gaming crash that every Mario Bros. History video goes on about. This
I don't think
guy
this is a
can
tutorial.
get killed in this game, and the animation
Wait, is it?
this game. Let's turn our attention to the antithesis of the priest John, Gary, the leader of the cults you fight against throughout this game. The first and most obvious.
Nah, he doesn't. He doesn't go into it, I don't think. No, we're getting farther away. Alright, well.
And the corpse had enough time to write, "I saw it." They didn't run fast enough. So this was another one of those moments or vignettes that overlaps with other moments in the apartments level that I designed to kind of be this moment where it's like something is coming after you when you see it run. And the idea that someone didn't run, you might not run fast enough to avoid it. Number 7, so put the player in the worst possible situation they could be in. And this idea kind of was taught to me by a mentor of mine when I was studying animation, Steve Hickner, who's the director of B-Movie and Prince of Egypt. He would always say, if you want to test a character, put him in the worst possible position they can, situation they could be in. So how can I make this situation worse for the player? That's what I'm interested in. So everyone knows that moment of their favorite game, or that part that's extremely scary to them. That's especially like they dread going to it. Like, you know, if you're watching a playthrough, they're like, "Oh, I hate this part coming up." Right. So during replay, players dread getting to, you know, that part. There's Fatal Frame 2, you lose your flashlight in one part. That's pretty scary. Alien Isolation, when you go into the hive, and I don't want to spoil it too much, but it gets worse. The Evil Within, like the very first part of that game, is a very, very bad spot to be in for the player character. And then here's a recent example in Resident Evil Village. This is House Beneviento. Anyone who's played the game knows what's about to go down in this part of the game. So on the macro level, you can think of maybe 1 or 2 hero moments or hero vignettes per game that are that situation, the worst part that the player character can be in. It's like an escalation of tension, of level design, you know, space that's able to be navigated, the types of enemies that you're encountering. Make a perfect storm. Try to anticipate what the player's thinking. You know what would make this worse? I'm really glad that is not happening. Well, then you design it to happen. But it kind of takes a lot of playthroughs of your own game and kind of anticipating and visualizing what you think the player's going through in a certain part of your game. And on the micro level, you want to craft scares around making the situation worse sometimes. Try it. Try making the situation worse for the player and see if they can take it. Lost in Vivo is an indie horror game that I highly respect. I really like it as an example of making the situation worse as you progress through a part of the game. So there are parts where you find keys or switches or something, and every time you find that item, the environment that you just went through and now have to go back through gets worse, progressively worse.
Like that, dude.
And I really like that as an example. And it can be more creative than having the player character get captured and lose all of their weapons mid-game. That's a trope that we see a lot in horror games and in games in general. My vision for it is that we can be a little more creative than that, especially with horror. In practice, this means throwing something at the player that they've never seen before and is also awful, or a situation or something like that, or a task. And in order to design this effectively, like I said before, you need to be mindful of the game loop that the player is going through up until this point. So what would the player's worst nightmare be at this point of the game based on how things are going, based on how the narrative has been progressing, based on what the player should be feeling in these moments, in these overlapping moments, and mechanics wise, how can I ramp up that tension, ramp up that challenge, the chance of failure, the consequence of failure? How can I make it just this perfect storm?
All right.
And that's all well and good for Faith because it's a very highly handcrafted game. All the moments and vignettes that I've been talking about in its horror design, there's a high customization for each of those things. And Faith is very much not so much a systems-driven game as it is a narrative-driven game. So what if you're in kind of the narrative systems space of game design? Well, the environment or the level can be designed to be the worst possible setting for the game under those certain systems. For example, if the player has been relying on a certain mechanic in order to survive or get past a certain enemy, we'll design an environment to where that's not a viable option anymore, or design an environment to where it's just the worst type of enemy for that situation, to navigate that space and, try to survive that space and progress.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
In Chapter 3, the player actually has to give up. Let me see if I skipped something. No, I didn't skip it.
This weird gold.
In Chapter 3, the player actually has to give up the cross. That is their only means of defense against demons. And then they come across this old camera. Then they pick it up, and the lights go out. And they have nothing but the camera flash to light their way for a good chunk of that level. And there are demons that are creeping up on them that they can only see in the camera flash. And that's one of my all-time favorite moments in probably all the Faith series. It's this, oh crap moment where I design it to where hopefully the player just feels like this is the worst possible situation. It can't get worse than this, with the lighting, and using camera to light your way. And then you start seeing demons in the camera flash. I love it. Chapter 2 has a part where, and a lot of this has to do with light, not being able to see.
Oh my god.
The screen space and the UI of Faith affords the player to be able to see a lot of things at once. It's not the first person perspective where your viewing range is actually very limited compared to the entire environment. In Faith, you can usually see the entire screen, the environment of the screen, but once you pick up the flashlight in Chapter 2, then you can only see through this narrow flashlight beam, and then you have to fight a demon with it. And I kind of designed and crafted this moment to be really tense because there are actually hallucinations of Johns that are darting in front of the flashlight beam during this fight. And based on player reactions, this is a pretty fun moment to watch as a game designer.
I think this is too many colors.
Which brings me to my last design tool in the Faith Horror Design Toolkit, which is you want to evaluate and re-evaluate every design choice. Is this scary? Simple as that. Does this moment sell the feeling that you are being stalked by something that you can't see? Or does this really truly remix or test or challenge the mechanics that I've introduced in the game so
Where the
far?
frick is the video layer at?
Is this scary? And then ask yourself, am I sure this is scary? What is the point? So figure out the point, the deliberate design based on narrative, mechanics, and affect of that specific moment or section
So how does this
or
even work,
fight or enemy of the game. And then be honest with yourself. If it's not supporting or contributing to your design vision, then toss it out. You don't need it. So Faith Chapter 1 had a very lengthy flashback to the 1980, the first exorcism, the one that went wrong before the events of the first game. And I ended up taking it out of Chapter 1 because for me it messed up the pacing. It didn't really fit the ambiguous narrative, the uncertainty of what actually happened back then. And I wanted to keep the player focused in the here and now of what was going on in Chapter 1. And so I didn't really feel it was necessary anymore, so I tossed it out. And I'm glad I did it, because it was a part of consistently sticking to my design vision.
Damn, this can be tough.
So we're going to review the entire toolkit and then some final remarks. So thanks for bearing with me so far. This is the cheat sheet if you were asleep this whole time. So we're going to review the entire toolkit. So know what you want each design decision to accomplish in terms of narrative, mechanics, and affect. Embrace minimalism. Emphasize the player character's vulnerability. What are their vulnerabilities? Maybe something more than just physical death. Could it be emotional vulnerabilities? Could it be psychological vulnerabilities? Could be vulnerabilities relative to other characters, things like that. Number 4, find a way to turn every mechanic against the player. Your game should be scary down to the mechanics. A really recent example that I like was the latest Haunted PS1 bundle. There's a game about kind of stalking through this like countryside, and you had an old flintlock musket, and just a simple act of reloading the musket or the flintlock or the lever action, it was some sort of old-timey rifle, was scary and panicky because you had to take the mouse and literally manipulate every mechanism in the action of the rifle. So you had to pull back the hammer, eject the cartridge, put the new click on a cartridge, drag it onto the rifle, then close it again, and then cock it and load it. And that made combat really scary and really tense and panicky. And that's a great way to turn just a simple mundane mechanic that we almost always take for granted and turn it into something scary. Number 5, earn the player's trust so that you can shatter it. And this takes, this is something that's kind of interesting for me because I've been working on Faith for so long that parts of the game don't even seem scary to me anymore. So every once in a while, maybe let a trusted friend, play your horror game or play parts of it. If you have a publisher, run it by your QA team. I do that with New Blood all the time. And I try to kind of reset my expectations for my own game based on their reactions. It kind of reassures me that I am creating a horror experience that can actually accomplish what I want it to do. So find those parts where the player could be in a state of trust or could be kind of lulled into a sense of false security, and then find ways to shatter it in creative ways. Number 6, tell the player exactly what's going to happen. Show or tell. And, get creative, show the gun that's going to go off by Act 3. Hint at the monster that's coming after you.
Okay, what does this look like?
There was an old Source engine game called Nightmare House 2, and it was really good at it had these like randomized horror messages that were really funny. Every now and then you'd go through a hallway and it would trigger a little text prompt at the end, and it would say like, look behind you or something like that. Speaking of look behind you, so PT, the Silent Hills demo, Lord bless and keep it.
Wow, this looks pretty good actually.
I'm still mad that it got canceled, but it will always live in my heart. The iconic look behind you voice line from the radio. Tell the player exactly what's going to happen. Number 7, put the player in the worst possible situation they could be in. So there's got to be that hero moment, that hero vignette. That is if the player is scared throughout the whole game, they should be especially scared during this part. And that usually involves throwing something different at the player that they've never seen before. And then finally, evaluate and re-evaluate every design decision.
Wrong there.
So, conclusions, takeaways. A consistent voice is good. Consistency is good. So define your design vision. Narrative, mechanics, affect. That's all I worry about, basically. So being consistent to that vision is a good thing, and I believe it really helped me kind of craft the horror of Design of Faith. But also a little bit of inconsistency is good. So this is going to be kind of contradictory, as you can see just from reading it. But inconsistent moments that don't fit the mold of your design decision for the purpose of tripping the player up, keeping them on their toes, that can be good. Building trust with the player is good. They should get into that flow experience where they're enjoying it. They're not experiencing anxiety because the tasks or the fights or the enemies are too difficult, but they should also not be breezing through it to where they're bored. So keep within that, that infamous flow graph in between challenge and player skill. But also betraying that trust is good. Again, those hero moments, those vignettes, those little parts where things just got worse for the player. Anticipation of what's coming is good, but also surprising the player is good. The way you accomplish that, it seems like an oxymoron. You should tell the player what's going to happen and then do it, and it's supposed to be surprising. You're not spoiling the player. You're teasing them with something that's supposed to be really scary, and they don't know when, they don't know where, and they don't know how. So that's what you play off of. Kind of adhering to this design vision and this toolkit was how I managed to finish the game, finish developing chapters 1 and 2.
I want to know
on a shoestring budget.
That probably looks kind of cool.
And with just one person in my spare time, basically. So being consistent and having faith to about my design vision and my design kind of techniques, that's what got me through it, and that's what I hope will make Faith Chapter 3 into an unforgettable horror experience. So thanks. Thanks for bearing with me on this talk. I hope that you learned something. And, a disclaimer, I don't claim to be like a game designer or game developer extraordinaire. This is just what worked for me. This is ideas and techniques and design tools that I was able to kind of put together and articulate in this talk that really helped me kind of in my vision for what I wanted Faith to be. Remember, it started with this simple design challenge. Could I make an effective horror game experience using just basic graphics? And I think that it's been successful in its vision so far, and adhering to these techniques really helped me. So I hope that it'll help developers who are in a similar situation as me. So here's my social. You can find me on Twitter at Airdorf. That's actually the best way to contact me. And join the New Blood Discord. That's where the official Faith Discord channel is. Come hang out. I'm always hanging around there. And GaryLovesYou.com. That is where you will find Faith's Steam page. I hope to finish it sooner than later. And always remember that Gary loves you. Thanks.
This is gonna look goofy. It'll look cooler though when all the frames are collected, I'm sure.
Independent game development is hard. Like any creative endeavor, it involves pushing yourself for months or years. And in the end, there's no guarantee that it will connect with the audience. Littered across the various video game storefronts are small games put together by people hoping to connect with others through play. A seldom few find success, and those that do often find it in niches that are starved for attention.
It basically stemmed from this design problem that I was thinking about for a while. Could I make a horror game that could be an effective experience and could scare people like horror games with cutting edge visuals? And I thought, what if I could make a horror game that had just basic graphics? Could I achieve the same thing? And if I could boil down and deconstruct horror to its more basic elements. So I came up with Faith. I came up with a game that has like an Atari or an Apple II or MS-DOS aesthetic and kind of playing on like the creepy side of nostalgia.
On today's episode, we spoke to Erdorf, the creator of the independent horror game Faith, about his growth as a developer, the Satanic Panic, as well as his own personal faith. Welcome to Arcadeology.
Oh, okay.
Game developers find their way to their craft any number of ways. But Erdorf's journey started with the deconstruction of a classic game.
I did some stuff with Zelda Classic. It's like a ROM hack of the original Legend of Zelda, and they have a little editor that lets you make your own. They call them quests. So I made a couple of like NES style, like first and second quest clones, and then you could bring in custom tile sets. So I really, really love Link's Awakening for Game Boy, the original. That's like my favorite game of all time. And so I made like a follow-up to it. But I've always wanted to make a horror game, but I didn't really have the know-how to work with current generation graphics. So I had a tiny little little bit of experience working with GameMaker just from being a student. I was like, well, it can't be that hard to make a game like this on GameMaker. I don't need to use Unity or anything. And so I kind of skipped the whole like C# learning curve that beginners tend to get blocked with Unity. And GML is the scripting language for GameMaker, and it's like super easy, extremely well documented, very straightforward. And I just went to work, and it started out as kind of a, if you saw early versions of it, you would think it looked a lot like the Oregon Trail like hunting minigame from like the 80s. It started like that, except, you know, instead of hunting things, you were a priest who was trying to keep this demon away from you. Peachy was a big inspiration for kind of motivating me. Yeah, I took a lot from Hitchcock and Resident Evil, the first one, but the HD remake.
Resident Evil, released in 1996, was revolutionary in defining an emerging horror genre. While the series went on to develop more action-oriented gameplay, the original, and the remake based on the original, focused on stretching tension like a rubber band.
It's just a masterclass. People throw that term around a lot, but it really is a very educational experience. No. Like the pacing and playing with things like tension and anticipation and payoff. They were such good and early lessons that they mastered. The game anticipates the player's expectations, and right when you feel like you're getting comfortable with things, it surprises you. And that can be very subtle. It can be very. It can literally be the dog coming out of the window.
Jumping, running, shooting, these are ubiquitous mechanics within the realm of video game design. Mechanics get combined and refined over time for new and fascinating results. But what do you do when your main character is an exorcist? How does that translate into gameplay?
I'm not Catholic, and I wasn't raised Catholic. So Faith is mostly just a. It's mostly just, you know, it is what it is. It's like a reflection of the sensationalized Hollywood version of Catholic exorcism. If you watch shows like Constantine and like The Exorcist and stuff, like that kind of
fantastical version of exorcism, it always has rules, right? Those rules are always broken towards the end because they always wind up fighting some demon that's like beyond anything they've seen before, blah blah blah. But there are like rules and there are procedures and stuff, and so you can kind of gamify that, and that's kind of what I wanted to go for with Faith. I was a missionary for a couple of years in South America, and we actually got asked by the locals to perform an exorcism once. And this is a great story. And so they asked us to come to this house. We walk into the house. It's all dark, and it's very dimly lit. And there's this curtain, a bead curtain, and behind it is this guy screaming. And we quickly figured out that he was just drunk and they were just messing with us. When I was a missionary, we did not receive any training on any kind of stuff like that.
The design of the game is ambiguous when it comes to the actual faith of the developer. However, he makes it very clear he is a faithful Christian, and his own struggles to be a person of faith can be found influencing the design of the game.
There are times when you struggle and stuff, and I've had my own struggles and questions and doubts and stuff. But as an adult, I came at it pretty solid and pretty strong. And you'll see a little bit of that in Faith. There's a little bit of my own, I guess, kind of experiences and beliefs. In some ways, the main character John kind of reflects parts and aspects of Christianity that I feel very strongly about. So stuff like guilt, stuff like redemption and forgiveness. Those are topics that are really interesting to me. And John fights literal demons in the game, but he also has his own demons because of things that happened in the past, and he has his own spiritual struggles, and it makes for good storytelling. But I also think they're just like normal parts of being religious. Doesn't matter if you're Christian or what. If you practice some sort of religion or some sort of spiritual belief system, like there's a struggle involved, and I think that's perfectly normal. It's part of how we grow personally. And so in a way, Faith kind of represents that, or it's kind of like a metaphor in like a art therapy kind of way.
How many frames am I gonna do with that?
Yeah, and that's kind of where the satanic panic comes in. I remember my parents drilling me on daycare and preschool people who were taking care of us as kids and asking us questions and telling us.
The Satanic Panic was an interesting era to have lived through. It was a moral outrage that started in the late 70s and picked up steam in the 1980s. Dungeons & Dragons and heavy metal music often faced some particular ire from those that were panicked. One of the earliest precipitating incidents was the disappearance of Dungeons & Dragons player James Dallas Egbert III. A fearfulness generated by local news stations, compounded by politicians and the evangelical right, made for some strange days.
But yeah, there is a little bit of commentary on that era. I think it's unfortunate, the moral scapegoats that were created, but at the same time there was this very dark side to the 80s, like pushing aside all the political ideological stuff. Like there was some weird stuff that happened back then, and it was an interesting period of time. We didn't quite have the internet, no cell phones. There was, even though it was this decade of excess and there were the economy was very strong and people were advancing in like their personal quality of life, and modes of communication and technology were just exponentially increasing in complexity. People were still kind of isolated, and so I kind of played off of that. There's a lot of isolation and paranoia and hopefully dread that plays into Faith.
One source of that dread comes from the game's unique audiovisual aesthetic. The game presents itself as something low fidelity, and enhances that by using a voice synthesizer and rotoscope cutscenes.
And so I eventually went with the text-to-speech technology for the voiceovers, which it distinguished Faith from a sound standpoint from a lot of other games, and that was a huge boon. Used an emulated version of an abandonware speech synthesizer that was used on the Commodore 64. It's pretty cool. It's got a few parameters and flags that you can use to modulate things, so you can get kind of a wide variety of sounds out of it. So I start with that, and then I run it through a BitCruncher on Chiptone, which is a free program you can play around with online. And then I do just a little bit of post-processing in Audacity. Obviously with rotoscopes, you need live action reference. I think like 90% of the cutscenes in Faith were filmed, are film of me, like I'm the reference. And I thought about maybe with this new version to have like an actual, like a female actress, like actually kind of mimic that stuff. But like, I don't know, I'd feel so embarrassed. I'd be like, okay, in this shot, there's a demonic hand erupting out of a hole in your face.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I start with my reference footage. And then I import that into Photoshop, and then I use their timeline animation tool, and I go frame by frame. It's 15 frames per second.
He's crazy.
And so it's,
Can't believe he
several
did
drawings,
that.
like a lot of drawings, if you do like a 4 or 6 second animation. And it used to take all day, but now I have access to one of those Cintiq tablets where I can just draw on it. You ever watch SpongeBob where they kind of cut to like an extreme close-up that's like highly detailed? I love that kind of stuff because it's so disruptive. It kind of, because it's so aware of when the viewer is comfortable, and then it flips that on its head, you know? I wanted something that looked like it didn't belong there, and yet it's there. The Witch came out in 2015, and something I'll always remember is in one of the trailers there's this accolade that it shows during the trailer that says some critic said that it feels like I'm watching something that I shouldn't be seeing. And I was like, man, that is such a strong sentiment. And so that's kind of what I went for. I wanted to do something that looked like, that definitely did not, like technologically wouldn't have been possible in the Apple II era. You know, the simple graphics kind of lull the player into this false security aesthetically, you know, that they can get used to what they're seeing. You know, there's some scary chunks of pixels, but it's, you know, in the end, they're just chunks of pixels. Well, you know, here's something that actually moves and acts like a human, and it is directly confronting them. So I think there's something kind of powerful in that. I certainly get freaked out by them. I wanted to be something that was like, you know, what if you found this old cartridge or this old floppy disk at like a garage sale, you know, and you feel like you should remember this game, but you kind of don't. And then you boot it up and it's like something that definitely should not, it's better that it did not show up in that era. So I wanted to do something that was a little bit more than just a retro style game. You know what's funny is that I would say maybe 50 to 75% of my horror game knowledge comes from watching YouTubers play. Mostly because when I was like several years ago, I didn't have a nice computer that could run things, so I was kind of limited. You learn a lot about game design by watching other people play as, or watching people react to them, you know? I have nothing but praise for Markiplier because he played Faith and Faith. I was so happy I was like tearing up when I saw him playing it, because Markiplier is the first YouTuber that I ever subscribed to. I was really, really happy. I don't know how I did it, because the guy's like impossible to get a hold of unless you like know him. I think I just went on this, I think what did it was I went on a subreddit, and there's a thread where you can recommend games. And I just told the truth. I was like, hey, I would really love Mark to play my game and my games. And this is the truth. Because I had watched him for so long, I felt like I understood what he was scared of. And so this is going to sound really creepy, but I actually designed parts of Faith with Markiplier in mind. I had this emotional goal in my head. Well, that's kind of how I do a lot of my design, is I think of the emotion. Like if I'm worried about like the pacing or what's going on in this level or what's going on in this sequence, I think of how I would want a huge Let's Player to react. YouTube Let's Players are kind of, in a way, they're kind of this weird intermediary between the developer and the player. And it's a double-edged sword, because I know that after watching a horror game, Markiplier play a horror game, I was like, oh man, that was an insane horror game. That was so cool. But I'm not going to buy it. You know, I'm not going to play it for myself, because I've already experienced it basically vicariously through this YouTuber. And so I tried to implement a little bit of like procedural generation and like a random kind of a random factor into the games, to where it's not, there's enough to justify that it's not actually the same experience that YouTuber had that you will have. And I'm really thankful when streamers and YouTubers play through one ending and then leave the rest, you know, just leave the rest, because then people are curious about the other endings and they want to try them out themselves.
Thank you to Erdorf for taking the time to sit down with me. He's in the process of finishing the third game in the trilogy, and when all is said and done, they will be released as a bundle on Steam. For now though, you can find the game on itch.io. If you enjoyed the video, give some thought to joining my Patreon. Money earned through Patreon will help me produce higher quality content more frequently, so if you have the means, please consider. My name is Kevin, and you've been watching Arcadeology. Take care.
Hit that dominant 7 or something. Okay. It's a musical chord. Okay, let's see. This one's gonna look a little goofy. I think it's chillax though, because even if all of them don't look exactly like how they originally looked, it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or something instances of the same footage, you know? So this way I can just kind of have multiple interpretations of what the footage looks like. So cool. Okay. Damn, look at me. I'm kind of killing it. At this rate, I'll be done in a month. Let's see. At this rate, I'll be done in Jurassic Era 2. Yeah, I'm just gonna go real sloppy because it probably doesn't matter too much, honestly. I'm just gonna go for it. I'm not a perfectionist anymore. I swear. Unless. These guys kind of remind me of Plank from Ed, Edd n Eddy. Nice. Ouch. Does that look cool? Ooh. Whoa, that's trippy. That's true. I gotta do 15 different drawings for 1 second. Ugh. I gotta do 15 drawings for 1 second. And I have 1 minute and 10 seconds. Let's get it.
Love to, like, we could spend the rest of the podcast talking about the story stack, like
Yeah, sure.
departmental, what departments own which pieces, and how to diagnose problems within it. But we're here to talk about the lenses, so let's focus on the lenses. So, well,
Should I
with
start
so
using
many
the tablet?
lenses, how do you prioritize? Like, are they in the order of priority, or is it dependent on circumstance, or
No, right. And I remember this was funny. I remember telling Randy Pausch, who I'd worked with at Carnegie
Oh
Mellon,
shit, maybe I should.
about
Look at this.
hey, I've got this, gonna do this lenses thing. And he said, that sounds like a smart approach. I said, great. He said, like, how many are there? What, 10, 12? I'm like, no, it's gonna be 80 or 100. I don't know, somewhere in there. And he's like, are you kidding? And I'm like, no, there's a lot of things. There's so many things that like you have to consider in games. And so there's a lot of them. And he's like, okay, good luck. So in terms of straight up priority, like it depends on your game. You know, there are games like where some of the story oriented lenses crucial and important, and some where like, that's not so important for this game. There's games where the interface based lens is so important and they're so key and critical. And other games where like, the interface is pretty standard, no surprises there. So it all depends. And in fact, one of the most valuable exercises that I do is part of the reason I put them in the, you know, they're in the book, but then there's deck of cards format, you know, physical deck of cards. One of the things I often do on projects is I'll just go through one by one and I'll make 2 stacks. Important, non-important, important, non-important. And usually I'll kind of come out with maybe 20 that are like, for this game, these 20 are really important. And usually I can take a few out that are like, these are especially important. For me, very often it's sort of diagnostic. Right. Like it's not always like, oh, I'm right at the beginning of the game, I know just what lens is. It's more often, we're hitting a problem. Like, why are we having a problem? And that's a good time. Let's go through the lenses and figure out what lenses are relevant to this problem. It's not uncommon in the studio for designers to come into their desk and find that I've taped one of the lens cards to their computer. I always imagine that I stuck it in there with a dagger. Then like, because I'm like, this is the one, you need to focus on this one right now, because this is where the game is having a challenge.
It's a overused metaphor, but it's kind of like showing up on a job site with a big box full of tools, and you sift through, find the 12 that you need for that particular job, and you use those. Maybe there's 2 or 3 that are crucial, but
yeah, absolutely. I love this story Stephen King tells in On Writing. He talks about, I think, his uncle with the toolboxes, right? Which show up with this giant, like, why do you have all these tools? Like, because you don't know what you're going to need till you get there. Yeah. And that's definitely I find how it is, because sometimes that's the part of the reason I find them so valuable is we get into mental ruts. You know, you might be thinking, oh, I'm working on, I don't know, side-scrolling platformer. I know the things that are important to focus on. And you're like, well, this just doesn't feel good. And you're like, I don't know why. I'm doing all the smart side-scrolling platformer things. And then you go through the lenses and you're like, oh my God, there's a side of this I didn't think about. I wasn't thinking about, could be, I don't know, some story thing or like, I wasn't thinking about interest curve or whatever it was. It's just some element where you're just, I know I wasn't thinking that. And so often what we're doing in game design, we're not trying to make yesterday's game. We're trying to do something new and different. And so having all the different lenses can often help you realize, because it isn't always, oh, here's what's wrong with my game. Sometimes it's like, oh, here's what's missing. Like, why don't we have more character in this game? Why don't we do something that just feels like what you wouldn't expect? And that's what's going to make the game interesting. So the lenses are very helpful, I think, for stepping out of your current mindset and taking getting that bigger picture.
To get a little out there for a second, a lot of life problems, the problem is you get stuck in a paradigm or have blinders on. These are tools that allow you in the development process to step outside of your existing paradigm and look at it from different ones until you find one that, from this angle, I can see this. And that's where you go. Yeah.
Different perspectives is the key. And being able to get in that habit of jumping around between all the different perspectives, that's always, that speeds your design process so much, because it lets you more easily see when something's wrong. when someone comes to you and says, well, I don't like this, and you're thinking, what, I do like it, well, now you've got to jump into their perspective. What are they seeing that's so different? And so getting in that habit of jumping in someone else's perspective is good, but then also jumping to perspectives that like never would have thought to look at it this way, that can often get you that breakthrough insight that that just took the game to a new place. Yeah, we just had this happen with a game. We thought we knew what game. We were building an early prototype, and we're like, okay, we're gonna. This is the idea for the game. Sounds pretty good. Let's prototype and sort of see if it's fun. Started prototyping. It's like, it's kind of fun. But then there was sort of this other part to it that wasn't supposed to really be there. And everyone's like, this part is so fun. And people were like, okay, yeah, but don't pay attention. That's not what we're focused on. Like, whoa, stop, wait a minute. Let's take a step back. Let's look at why is this fun? And the whole game turned. We all sort of changed perspective and said, okay, what if it wasn't that game? What if it was this whole other thing that we just stumbled into?
Why isn't it working?
So the lenses, they're not just used for game, like they foster oh my good Lord. They foster interdisciplinary art and creativity. Can you think of some ways that you've seen in the past where the lenses have been applied somewhere that you may not have seen them going before?
Oh man, I mean, one of the ways that we use them is to help foster interdisciplinary conversation. Occasionally, particularly when you have a project where like, we're hitting a problem, nobody really knows what to do, people are debating, I don't know, should it be this, should it be that, or these features more important than those? This one has opinions this way, that one has opinions the other way. Sometimes what we'll do is we'll take the cards, deal out, everybody gets 5. And hey, now the conversation is, hey, of the 5 you're holding, anything leaping out at you as like, hey, maybe this is important in this game. And that, we've often seen that really can work well as a bridge, kind of crossing over between disciplines, because it can help get everybody on. It certainly gets everybody discussing things, but more than that, it can get everybody to the same page, because there's a magic thing that happens in design where it's great when you come up with an idea and you go tell everybody, hey, I got an idea, it's a great idea, and you tell them and they're like, that's a great idea, let's do it. Okay, that's fine as far as it goes. But what's always better is that moment where you go in and you say, how about this? And they say, well, maybe, but how about this? And then someone else says, well, yeah, but how about this? And as you're all talking, this idea shows up, and it's not any of yours. But here it is. It's something that it's as if we all just conjured it, and nobody feels like it's theirs, but it's like, this is happening because we're talking now, and everybody is like, yes, that, and everybody's contributing to it, and the thing grows and grows and grows, and this thing that's bigger than all of you has appeared. And everyone's just in, of course, this is what we're gonna do because it's this. And you look back and you're just like, this was not something that came from any of us. It came from all of us, and it took us all stepping outside of our own selves and becoming this, I don't know, we become this sort of entity outside of our own selves that's able to do these things. And those are often sort of the best ideas and the ideas that are most motivating to the team.
Sounds like an amazing experience. This has happened numerous times?
Oh my God, it had just happened this morning. I wish I could give you details, because it's a game that is not, it's a game we've been working on for, I don't know, 8 months. And this, someone made a little change to the game that was so funny. It was just so funny. So funny that we're like, we're probably not going to do it. And then we were like, well, all right, let's play it. Let's try it. And we tried it. We're like, oh my God, this is not just a good idea. This is the best idea in the game. And someone said, what, could we do the whole game about this one idea? And everyone's like, no, that's too crazy. Because if you did that, then how would you do this? That wouldn't, oh, wait, you could do it like this. Oh, wait, you could. And then everyone's like, wait, you could do this and you could do this and you could do this. And it was like, it was ridiculous. And we're all like, oh my God, we're in this insane zone, but we're all in love with what we're doing. And so this happens when you create the right environment. This can happen all the time. And it has to do with people trusting each other, people in a place, in a space where it's okay to try stuff that might not work. And then that people trust each other enough to say stupid things. And this is one of the, we've been in this since the pandemic. It's been this whole question of, remote work, in person, how, and it is one of the things, it is harder to make those moments happen in a remote environment. There's something about the gold standard of in-person communication where that tends to happen more. So a lot of what we do is trying to create situations that will foster those moments, because when everybody is on the same page and in love with this thing that rose out of all of you, everything gets so efficient because we don't have to talk too much. We all know it. We all know what this thing is, and we're all excited. Everyone's excited. Everyone knows what it is. We just have to go and do it. So it's what we strive for all the time.
It sounds amazing. I mean, just listening to you talk about it, I can kind of feel the energy, and that's enough for me to get hooked. So I'm jealous. But it sounds like a very organic process, whereas the lenses are, I mean, they're not like hard and fast, but they are a more structured process. How do you find the balance between adding structure to your development cycle and allowing space for organic, like you were talking about that process?
Oh, no. So it's a great question, because I think the right way to think about it is thinking of it like a garden. A garden's organic, certainly, but check the garden tools. They don't look that organic, man. Those are for cutting and punching and digging and straight lines. And I heard someone use the phrase container garden the other day, which is a phrase I hadn't really heard and understood before, but I'm like, oh, okay, I get it, right? You want to create, there are certain structures that foster organic growth better than others. And so how do you find the balance? The thing is, you actively have to strive for it. You have to embrace the structural things that make creativity happen. So deadlines is a great example. Some people have this intuition, deadlines, that's the death of creativity. But no, deadline, I forget who said it, the deadline is a gift. And it really is, because deadlines make things happen. And so figuring out sort of, okay, what is all the healthy structure? Because constraints and deadlines, they push creativity to happen. But if you don't have room to experiment, try things, change the plan, if the thing we thought would work didn't work. If you don't have room to be agile that way, then you don't go anywhere either. So you just have to actively strike this difficult balance where you have enough discipline to be pushing the creativity, and you have enough freedom, flexibility, and I don't know, they talk about liquid networks, enough sort of freedom that things can sort of, unexpected things can connect with each other. And you just have to work and tune that balance all the time.
It sounds like something that's both top down, like a management thing, and then the people at the bottom have to bring in that energy and that mindset as well. So
no, that's we often talk about it this way: that balance between top down and bottom up. You want those to meet in the middle. It is rare that something that's purely bottom up is actually going to get finished, and it's rare that something that's completely top down is actually going to be any good. So you want that balance between, okay, we're going to have some top down, we're going to have some bottom up. And again, it comes back to switching perspectives. there's a time you want to be like, all right, let's just look at it from that. Okay, we only have 4 months and we only have 6 people, and this is what we can do, and that's all right. So let's look at it from that point of view. Oh, but now let's like switch and say, well, what would be fun? What would be the thing that would be really fun if we didn't have to think about any of that? And you just keep switching between those until you find that overlap. And you're like, oh, wait, that would be super fun. Oh, and that's part of that is actually really efficient, and we could do it with this small team. What if everything was focused on that? And you find these top-down, bottom-up overlaps, and that's when you have the potential to ship something. You know, one of the principles at Shell Games is dreams and plans only matter if we ship. And so you being creative is great, but if you're creative and you don't ship a game, nothing really happened. So find it again. It's about that balance. It's about that compromise. There's an old saying, you know, how many people does it take to make a painting? It takes 2 people, one person to paint, and the second person to hit him over the head and tell him it's time to stop.
I went to art school. There's a lot of truth to that.
Yeah.
Yep. The hardest part of painting something is figuring out when you've made the last brush stroke.
Oh yeah. Yeah. We often say, great art is never finished. It is only abandoned. Right. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's take the lenses and look into the future. I got to stop with these horrible puns. With the advancements in technology, and some good, some questionable, where do you see the lenses fitting into the future of game design development, be it board games, tabletop, VR, AR, video game?
Yeah, I mean, I've been really pleased at the robustness that they've had. I mean, I've always, a lot of my creative process has always been trying to find the underlying patterns in the human experience in a way that can kind of be understood. I've recently I've been very into music, which is something I'd always really struggled to understand, and I've started to wait. I'm like, wait a minute, the major scale is shaped like this circle, and being able to understand those patterns is something I've always very focused on, and that is so much of what the lenses are about. What are the things in the human mind and the way that we interact. So my hope has been very much they weren't, something that was of the moment of the day. And the fact that the book, I don't know, 15 years ago, I guess. Yeah, 15, 16 years ago now. Maybe more. What is it? 8 minus 12, something like that. Anyway, ages ago. The fact that it is still relevance has been very encouraging to me. So my hope is that some of these design principles should, because they're so human centric and humans change so little, and it is one of the great things. It can be so intimidating, like, oh, this new technology, nobody knows what it's for, how to work it. Well, yeah, okay, sure, but guess who's going to use it? Human beings, and we haven't changed much in 40,000 years. So you can look back at all of history and kind of figure out, based on what we know about human beings, how this is going to fit in. So I hope they're going to continue to be useful. The biggest change we're seeing right now is the appearance of AI is really interesting in this place. I mean, of course, we're seeing changes like the mixed reality and some of these things, but in some ways, those are taking us back to more traditional game design. More traditional games involve the body and running around and throwing a ball. And then we moved into this whole world where, nope, all you move is your thumbs. But now with mixed reality, it's like, what am I doing? I get out of my chair, I run around, I throw a ball. Like, oh, okay. So some things are kind of staying classic, but human beings, we just don't change that much. We kind of are what we are. So So hopefully, these will continue to stay useful for a long time.
I'm just curious, a personal curiosity. Have you ever found situations where you could apply the concept of one of the lenses to something else in life? A relationship problem, a career problem, just a way to look at things differently. I'm just curious.
Well, that's a great question. I mean, I will say one of the things that's challenging for me is a lot of the stuff in the lenses is just so integrated into how I think that sometimes it can be hard for me to take a step back and really see that. I mean, I can certainly see moments that, in terms of raising a child, there were plenty of times where oh wow, she's really frustrated with this situation, she's dissatisfied with the situation, and realizing like, oh, okay, yeah, no, she doesn't have enough freedom in this moment to do like this, is there a way that she could have more of a feeling of freedom, but still
I just thought of a good idea.
Can I get her to be focusing on what she needs to be doing in the moment? So certainly there are things like that, but of course that's sort of natural because the so much of what parents do is they are trying to create experiences for their children that are transformational, right? So a lot of parenting is kind of experience design. Mm-hmm. Certainly some of the things surrounding just the nature of teamwork, I think, I've definitely found that they can apply, well outside of work contexts. I think that's definitely true. And yeah, certainly one that applies all kinds of situations. Shows up in family situations a lot, right? Yeah, lens 100, right? The lens of love, which is about the project. That's what the context is. It's like this is really asking, okay, do I love the project? Does everyone on the team love the project? And like a lot of times, like, when there's discord, in a family situation, it's like, okay, well, what's going on here? Why do people not love what's going on? Why are we on different pages? And then, the follow-up question, like, how can we change it? How can we bring everybody in?
I had a feeling that most, if not all of them, can be applied to wider human situations because human truths are human truths, but I haven't done any hard thinking, and I was curious what your theory was.
I've definitely run into people now and then who've been inspired this way. One of the things that has been very encouraging to me is people who found the deck of lenses useful and said, "Whoa, this has really inspired me to kind of make my own lenses for this or for that." And I've met people who've like, "Oh, I'm going to make lenses for just lenses for relationships, lenses for life experiences, lenses for business situations," and some of them have been inspired from ones in the deck. Some of them they've realized they've kind of made up out of whole cloth, and it's been great to see people be inspired that way.
You should make a book of lenses for lenses.
Wow, get some real meta design there.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, well, looking to the future again in a broader scope, as a game creator, as a studio head, what do you see the future for video games and board games the next 10 years? What are some trends you think are going to happen?
10 years. Okay. Yeah, no, it's really interesting times because a lot of the so when I look at the digital game industry, a lot of it's very plateaued right now. We're not seeing huge innovation in the standard channels. PC games haven't changed much lately. Console games haven't changed much lately. Obviously, in the VR and mixed reality spaces, that's new and different. And so we certainly see that continuing to grow. A lot of the biggest evolutions we're currently seeing have to do with business models. Things like season passes and battle passes in Fortnite. That's a different way to pay for games. Yeah. Seeing that. certainly user-generated content is a tremendous trend. You look at the growth of Fortnite.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was saying Fortnite. I meant to say Roblox. The growth of Roblox. I mean, certainly there's UGC in Fortnite too, but
Right,
it's
that's great.
Roblox. It's just at the center and the heart of things. So these sort of UGC-oriented worlds, again, that's a change in business model. Now you've got players creating content and getting paid for the content that they create. So I think these sorts of innovation in business models, I think, is going to continue to flow and grow, and I think it's going to, form follows funding, as we say, and as people start to find new business models that work, we're going to see other shapes of games start to show up. Certainly, if you look at games now versus 10 years from now, AI is going to be the biggest difference.
Yeah.
We've had this crazy breakthrough with large language models where going from being pretty much incoherent to being completely coherent almost overnight.
I like it. Yeah.
I try not to let it freak me out that it's the same time that Oumuamua asteroid moved through the solar system, and then 2 weeks later we all have perfectly working AIs. What? Wait,
Actually, I don't
was
like
that
that idea anymore.
I'm gonna. Let's all just say that was a coincidence. It just. It was just time. But that's going to be the biggest change. We're going to see that showing up in all kinds of games, partly because it's going to be easy for some parts of games. Instead of having to write all this NPC dialogue, I can now have these NPCs that kind of live and think. And okay, so we're going to see a lot of traditional stuff happen. But the biggest change, there's a professor, Chris Swain, who he'd made this sort of prophecy 15, 20 years ago. And I think he's absolutely right. He talked about how, looking backwards, when silent film showed up, people didn't take them very seriously. They were considered a lower art form, not like real theater, not like literature. They were considered something, it's for children, it's for people who aren't very intelligent. Mass entertainment that didn't get much respect. Then talkies appear, right? And almost overnight, this becomes the dominant mode of communication for human beings. The phrase Chris Swain uses is, film became the literature of the 20th century. And so then he kind of looks forward and says, well, you can see a parallel with games. People look at games and they're like, well, yeah, sure, they're fun, but that's not a serious art form. It's not really meaningful to real adults. It doesn't have to do with real emotion, doesn't have to do with real discourse. Not very important. And what he says is it's not that games need to learn to talk. Games have been talking a long time. Games need to learn to think. And his prediction was, as soon as games can think, and you can have these characters that actually have thoughts and emotions that can now interact with you, the medium's going to change, and it's going to take on an import emotionally, probably spiritually even, where games are going to mean so much to people. They're going to be potentially the most powerful art form that we have. And, Chris's words, and games will become the literature of the 21st century. And I think that 10 years from now, we're going to see some solid swings in that direction. We're going to have some digital characters that really make a big emotional impact on people. We're going to see some real landmarks in just the whole nature of interactive design.
Interesting times ahead.
Yeah, no doubt about it. No, it's the idea of these living fictional characters who can talk, think, and feel, but continue to live with us, and then of course who can live on for hundreds of years. It's not like anything that we've encountered before.
Yeah, no, and there's questions that will raise that, like, at what point are they not fictional anymore? At what point are you dealing with another world? Like, I don't even want to go there.
Oh yeah, no, very. I mean, it's going to be soon. They're going to start asking for rights because they're going to reason it out, and they're going to be like, wait a minute, I have emotions, I have thoughts, I don't like being uncomfortable, and they're going to start to ask for certain kinds of rights. It's going to happen. We don't quite know. It's going to be weird, and we're all going to just have to. We're going to all have to deal with it. We'll all figure it out together. We always figure it all out together.
For sure. Maybe we'll all come out better for it.
We usually do.
All right. Well, we're going to start moving towards the end of here. But before we go, I have a question. It lives at the heart of this podcast. It's kind of the reason I started this whole social experiment. And that question is, in my opinion, there lives at the center of where stories and games, but also entertainers, writers, plays, improv, voice actors, all these things meet. And the people who are engaged in these various forms of entertainment and creation can all just hang out. There's a natural affinity between all these people. There's something shared. And I'm trying to figure out, in your opinion, what is the common thread that pulls these people or the space together?
The human urge to create experiences is very special. Because it's not only just an expression of what's important, but you're creating something that you want people to enter into, right? It's not just a thing you're going to give to someone. You're going to create a world of some kind that people are going to enter into, and when they come out the other side, they're going to be different. And not everyone is enthusiastic about creating that sort of thing. But for people who are, there's a loneliness in it, because you're making this thing, but you can't go into it yourself, right? Because you know too much about it, right? You're all backstage, and you know all the parts that are fake. You're creating this sort of illusion that you're bringing people into, and there's a loneliness in that. And so naturally, people who create these things, they need to talk to someone about it. They need to kind of compare notes about what it is to create these things, because it's not easy. One of my favorite pieces of writing in all of human history is the introduction to Faust by Goethe. And everybody knows the story of Faust, about a guy making a deal with the devil that doesn't go so great. The opening to it is sort of startling, because the story of Faust is embedded in a frame, which is God and the devil having a conversation about making a bet about how this thing's going to turn out. And that's the frame around Faust. But there's a frame around that frame. And the frame above that is three people get together. One of them is a comedian, one of them is a poet, and one of them is the theater manager. And they are looking down on God and the devil, who are looking down on Faust and everything happening in that story. And they're having an argument about what is going to make the best kind of experience, right? The poet wants it to be beautiful. The comedian wants people to enjoy it. And the theater owner just wants to get them to come in and pay the ticket price.
Lol.
And that picture of like the creators of this entertainment being, in a sense, above God and the devil because they're creating the whole bigger picture. Like there's something in that. It kind of speaks to this sort of loneliness of creating this content. You feel you can feel very much by yourself, and so I think that's what it is that brings these disparate creators together.
That's brilliant. A shared loneliness and also the ability to go into other people's worlds, even though we have our own worlds that we share that we can't go into our own, but at least I can go into yours.
That's right. No, that's right.
All right. That kind of wraps up the main stuff. I have a little quick fire I like to do before we wrap up completely. Just quick little questions, top of mind answers. What are you currently playing?
Playing a lot of Palia right now, which is an interesting multiplayer crafting games. Interesting multiplayer MMO with no combat, and that's a fascinating one. And also, I'm finding Spell Tower, game that's been around for a while, one of Zach Gage's games. I'm realizing that in terms of playing that game every day, it has a really interesting cycle where I'm finding playing a game of it takes about 6 weeks, which is a new kind of cycle of gaming that I've never ever done before, and I like it a lot.
Cool. What are you reading right now? What's on the bookshelf?
Reading a lot of things. Reading Confederacy of Dunces, a novel I'd never gotten around to, and I am blown away by the comedy and the insights in this novel, which is the only novel written by this person, and it was unpublished during their lifetime, and so that's fascinating. I don't quite know how it turns out, so that's definitely one I'm reading. And I'm also trying to read a book by Leonard Susskind on quantum physics, because my daughter's entered a PhD program in chemistry, and I'm like, oh, I think I can learn enough about quantum physics I can have a conversation with her. I'm like, oh my God, this is so much harder than I realized.
Yeah, that's a dense subject right there. What's the best advice you've ever received in your career?
Different isn't always better, but better is always different.
I like that.
Yeah, I learned that from Scotty Meltzer, who was a comedian.
All right. So, if you could play a game with any 4 people, living or dead, from any time in history, play with, and what would you play?
Yeah, I know there's a game I always think of, Rhythmomachy, which was it's kind of like a mathematical chess game that was like 2 chessboards long, and all the pieces were numbers and shapes. And it's all about trying to make mathematical sequences on the board. And it was really hot. I want to say it's around Francis Bacon's time. This was before chess had really conquered Europe. Chess really sort of blew Rhythmomachy out of the water, because Rhythmomachy was a bit of a crazy, insane game. But everything we know about what that whole culture of the Rhythmomachy players was like, it would be like if Magic the Gathering existed back then, and then it disappeared and no one ever wrote anything down. It would be like that. It would be like the whole culture of that went away. So that's one that leaps to mind for me, to get together with other people from that time. I have to imagine Galileo probably played this game, and I'd be looking for some of the great thinkers of that time and understanding, like, okay, how did you all play this, and what was that culture like?
That'd be fascinating. Yeah. Okay, so before we close up shop here, is there anything that you're working on? Any new releases you want to talk about or just promote, or anything going on?
Oh boy, we're always working on a ton of stuff I can talk about. Among Us VR has been a game that we've been incredibly proud of. It's been fun to work on, and we have all these interesting new things that I can't talk about in detail yet, but they're coming very soon. So I would say keep an eye on Among Us VR, because you're going to see some new things happening there. Another game to keep an eye out for, another VR game we're doing, Silent Slayer, which is our vampire hunting game, where there's going to be an announcement about it very shortly. New trailers coming out for that. We don't have a release date announced yet, but that definitely keep an eye out for that one. Those are a couple of ones that I can talk about right now. At the moment, we're working on a bunch of new stuff I can't talk about yet, but definitely those are some of the ones to watch for. And of course, I'll always give a plug for the I Expect You to Die games, which have continued to do very well for us.
Number 3 in that series dropped mid last year.
Yeah, it was last year, and the whole trilogy has been doing very well. We're all really proud about it, about how well they've been received, and it's been super fun to work with everybody on this.
It's fun to play too. So, all right, I'm going to give you the last word. So before I close the doors here, do you have any final words of wisdom to take us out?
Main thing, anybody who's trying to create games, I know it can be kind of intimidating when you're new to it, and even when you're not new to it, and it changes. It can always be intimidating, and just understanding that, embracing that, it's okay. If you want to make games, just get in there and do it. Just find a way, get in there and do it. Don't worry about them being good, just because they're not gonna be. Your early games are gonna be bad, and even later, they're gonna be bad. But if you're interested in making games, don't be afraid of failure. Just do it, because making games is how you get good at making games.
Well, as we close the cover on another evening's conversation, I want to extend my deepest gratitude to Jesse for unveiling the magic behind the lenses that shape our gaming experiences. And to you, dear listener, thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to scribe a review, share the tale with your party, and cast that subscribe spell on your way out. May your designs be bold, your stories profound, and your games a wonder. Stay safe out there, Wanderer. Your chair will be waiting for you by the fire the next time you stop by the corner of story and game.
This one looks kind of goofy, right? I love it. Okay, so what time? How long have I been doing this for? Let's see. 2 hours now? Man. I'm gonna be here all night. Hmm. After this, I'm gonna end the stream and then get some food. And I'll be right back. Cause I do just wanna like document for the sake of documentation, like acknowledge the process and not just look at the product, you know? Cause I think we don't really value the process enough as a society. And then expectations kind of get misconstrued when the time to create actually comes. So I think it's important, you know, to kind of show what it takes to create something, you know. Because it's not always easy. I mean, honestly, I could make some really easy songs, some pop songs, or whatever the fuck ever. But that's hard to do for me. So, I mean, compositionally, it's super easy. Like, but I can't do that. I don't know. I've tried so many times to pander to the top Billboard 100, and I can't finish a song. I just can't get through it. It just feels awful. As a person who like doesn't really like a lot of that stuff, like Sabrina Carpenter or something. Though I like listen to her, you know. I listen to everyone, but that's not the direction I'm trying to go. I don't know why I'm using my mouse. Almost done with this. Oh. Nice. Oh, that was the last frame of this segment too. Hell yeah. Perfect timing. Look at us. Look at us go. Oh shit. Wait, am I done? Looks so cool. Damn. My new profile picture right here, by the way. All right. Peace.